If This Goes On, Don't Panic. Bringing hope to the world through speculative fiction.
Hello and welcome to If This Goes On, Don't Panic. Today we have writer and musician Josh Denslow. Unfortunately, Diane is not with us today. Since she's not here, we're going to make this intro part really super quick. Just a few business items for everyone out there. I hope you all are liking the new logo. If you're interested in who created that for us, that was Brianne Castagnazzi. You can also find a lot of her work on the Solarpunk magazine. So if you have not seen that, go and check that out. And as far as transcripts go, I know we've been talking about this pretty regularly on here. I've basically run out of time to work on that for now, so I'm hoping to get more of those up. There's a good chunk in the middle of the podcast that's up and out there, and I know there's some really early ones that don't have transcripts either. I'm just going to wait until I'm done with everything else for those. You know, early days of the podcast, we've been doing this 5 years. I feel like things have changed a lot, so I'm a little less concerned about getting those ones done. Remember, you can find us on YouTube if you're interested, if that's a way you want to listen to us. We do not have video on there. We just have our background logo, but you can listen to us there. All right. So all of that said, I am going to take a little break, and then we're going to get to our guest. Thanks. Okay, and we are back. Our guest today is Josh Denslow. Josh Denslow is the author of the collection Not Everyone is Special, the novel Supernormal, and the collection Magic Can't Save Us. His most recent short stories have appeared in Electric Literature's The Commuter, The Rumpus, and short story Long, among others. He is the email marketing manager for bookshop.org, and he currently lives in Barcelona with his family. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Very excited to have you on. I think before we dive into Magic Won't Save Us, and I have a lot to ask you about that, I want to hear about your origin story as a writer, how you got interested in writing and became a reader. I know you did a whole bunch of other creative stuff in there too. So, I think it'd be interesting to hear about all that.
Basically, I started off as, an avid reader, of course, right? I think that's where everybody's origin story should start, somewhere like that. But when I really started to think that I could do more with my writing, as I got older, I actually gravitated toward film, and I went to into the film program at Columbia College, Chicago.
Right.
And I focused on some writing and directing and editing, and started making some short films. And I did the thing that a lot of people do when they graduated from there, which is that I moved to Los Angeles. And the interesting thing, I know you and I talked previously a little bit about band stuff, but it really timed out because I was playing in my college band at the time. I also played the drums, and they had nothing to do with film, but they had a friend that was in Los Angeles, and they said, "Do you want to move to Los Angeles with us?" And I thought, I'm about to graduate film school. I'm going to say yes to this. And so I just did it, and I ended up staying there for 10 years.
Yeah.
I will say the film industry it's pretty rough.
Yeah.
It can make you feel a little crazy. And one thing that kind of bothered me is for all the work that I did, writing scripts and doing stuff, it's really hard to get people to see it. There's not a real avenue for it. If I write a really great feature script and nobody buys it and no one makes it, there's not like there's another avenue where I could sell that script and people read it, And so my wife started taking a creative writing course through the UCLA Writers Program. And I was like, man, what a great idea. I'm going to totally copy you. And I went and I started writing some short stories. And I had done that, a long time in the past, but I hadn't done it in a really long time. And it was just so nice to start learning about the writing community and what was possible out there. And there's so many people. It's kind of like, again, I could make a correlation with bands, which is that, if you start diving into independent music and independent writing, you can just find so many little corners and pockets of really interesting things going on, and people really
Yeah.
pushing some pretty amazing stuff. And so it wasn't long after that we left Los Angeles and we moved to Austin. And I decided that I was going to kind of take a step back from trying to push film and really go all in on fiction writing. And that's sort of the beginning of it. I at one point I collected a bunch of the stories I had been working on and started trying to get that published as a collection. And that was ultimately what became my first collection, Not Everyone is Special. And then I had about, I don't know, 8 years trying to make a novel work. I worked on it. I rewrote it from scratch like 4 times. And that ended up becoming, I actually, that one was in the background and I wrote other novels that are still not been published so far. But that one always kind of was just in the background. And that ended up getting picked up and being my first novel. And I guess to wrap up this story is during all that, I started working on the stories that eventually became Magic Can Save Us. And that's the collection that I just put out this year. To me, it's the culmination of everything I've been trying to do in my writing for a really, really long time. And it's 18 stories, and some of them actually go back probably like 7 years. And some of them are fairly recent, but they're all what I call thematically linked.
Yeah.
And so what I did in here was I basically said, I think every story needs to have a sort of a relationship. It could be at different parts, beginning, middle, end. Something's not going quite right, and then a magical creature appears, something that
Yeah.
people are familiar with from pop culture or whatever. And how does that change the situation for the people in the relationship? And they became a really, really fun way for me to break away from other bigger projects over the years. I would say, you know what, I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna work on a Magic Can't Save a story now. And I think that they were probably the most fun stories I've ever written. So I don't know. I think that maybe answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You must be a glutton for punishment going film, music, and publishing. I mean, the 3 toughest things to do.
Yeah, I think I am a glutton for punishment. My wife will say to me, "I don't know how you can handle all the rejection." Like she's
Yeah,
a super talented as well, and but the idea of sending a story out to a bunch of journals and just hearing no, 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 no was enough to make her not go that route. And
yeah.
yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, film, I think, is the apex. Film is like, if you really want to feel
Wow.
that you can't make any progress, then you could try to go into film. And then I think music's probably second, and or maybe, I don't know, maybe tied with fiction writing. The thing that's nice, like I said,
Uh,
what I love about putting music out there and putting out fiction writing is there are people out there that do read and do listen to independent stuff. But if you're just writing
no.
scripts, they just die. Like if nothing happens with them, that all your hard work is just
Yeah,
sitting
yeah.
there.
Now you just have to try podcasting,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
you'll hit the mark.
exactly. Yeah, totally. I can't wait to start trying to market market my own podcast.
Oh gosh, it's like being in an indie band. You know what I mean? It's just there's just so many.
Yeah.
It's hard to
Oh yeah.
cut through the noise sometimes. But wow, yeah, you've just been through the ringer on all of those. I can only speak to music, and we chatted about this a little bit before the podcast started. But wow, I just got tired of running into that wall over and over again, and playing in the same band for I don't know, 5 years, and then still sometimes playing to like 3 people in a room or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh god.
Sure. And the analogy for that with the book would be you write a book and you put it out there and you're struggling to get the same, you're struggling to get eyes on it. You're struggling to get people to read.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. I mean, trying to find an avenue with your art that takes you to the exact right people, the people that are waiting for it, that want it. It's really it's so much more luck
Yeah.
than anything else. I think you do something and then you just kind of hope that you're gonna put it somewhere where the right
Yeah.
person hears it or the right group of people hear it, and it moves you forward from there.
It is such unbelievable luck sometimes because you see some of these, and I'll just go with bands, but this could just be the same for writers too. You know, you get some of these bands that get really huge, and you're like, how, why? When this other band I know is fantastic, and they get 5 people to
Right.
come to their shows, I'm one of them. You know, or they'll hit that middle range. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it's it's almost impossible to guess, and it's usually if you've known anyone who's gotten big, you would never have guessed that they're the one who's going to get big. You know what I mean? Or they'll get big for a little time and then just disappear, you know, or it's wild.
Yeah, it's really there's no way to know what's gonna happen with anybody's journey. I think the thing that I've learned as I've been at it for, 20 something years now, nearly, is that if you like basically I don't know how to put this. Let me double back, but like if you believe, right, that something can come of it, then you'll keep going, right? I think that the reason you see a lot of young people at it is that maybe they're more dreamy, right? Like maybe the
Mhm.
younger you are, the more you live in the sort of fairy tale realm in your head, and the older you get, and the more you have to work a job and do your stuff, and life becomes a little more mundane.
Yeah.
You start to lose that part where you can dream about getting to that next step or that next place. And I think that I've met a lot of people over the years that trying to get into film, trying to get into music, trying to get into the writing world, that that's for me. I When I see them back away or I see them leaving, it's always that if you can't believe it, no one else is going to believe it either. And so you
Yeah.
have to have the sort of confidence to say, I feel that that people that need to hear this or need to read this or need to see this will eventually see it, then you'll stick with it. And so even though I've had times where I've had to slow down, I mean, when, I have with 3 children, and, there's, life's ups and downs, and
Yeah.
we've had big, move across the ocean and everything. But the, for the most part, I feel that it's still possible. And because of that, I haven't given up. So that's kind of where I fall right now. That sure, like maybe I went and dabbled in a whole bunch of different things that are really, really hard to get into, but it always felt possible to me. It always felt
Yeah.
cool. And so and you have to believe in what you're doing, and like I said, with these stories, it really started to feel like my time in film, my time, all that time I spent just thinking about writing and everything. It's all in there. It shapes you. These are not stories I
Mhm.
could have written 20 years ago. I can only write these right now, and the only way you can get to those points is if you stick with what you're doing.
Yeah. I can relate to that a lot because I would not be involved in podcasting if it wasn't for music, you know. It helped me get used to being the center of attention. It helped me get used to just sound equipment and working with sound, you know.
Yeah.
It helped me get used to being around creative people, you know, or other creative people, you know. Yeah, so it definitely I hear what you're saying. Like you can kind of build these disparate skills and things up and maybe they take you somewhere that you didn't really expect, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you asked 19-year-old me if I would be writing short stories and pushing those, I wouldn't have thought that's what I would be doing for sure.
Yeah.
And you have to
Yeah,
be willing to go with that journey. You have to be willing to go where the journey takes you.
absolutely. So let me ask you, I guess this is part of the like where did you come from question, but which authors really have inspired you to be the writer that you are today? It doesn't matter if they're science fiction or not. Most of our listeners, you know, are well-read people. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I wouldn't say I'm the most broad sci-fi or fantasy reader, but when I was younger, some of the most like formative things for me like were things that were not part of reality, right? I mean, for me when I was a kid, a really fun day would be to wake up on a Saturday morning and say, I'm just going to read the entirety of The Hobbit right now. and the Lord of the Rings. I can't even tell you how many times I read that. I mean, so much that when the movies came out, they disappointed me.
Huh.
I never meet anyone that says they were as disappointed in the movies as I was, but they could never live up to what I had created for them in my head. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
how many good people worked on the movie and how many amazing, talented people. It was just never gonna achieve that. I read a ton of Isaac Asimov. I was a huge Isaac Asimov fan,
Oh,
and also Robert A. Heinlein. Read a bunch of his stuff, and then my mom was a huge horror book fan, and so some of the earliest books I read were just taking stuff off my mom's shelves, like Stephen King and Dean Koontz, and
yeah.
a bunch of like whatever the most popular horror books, Peter Straub, people like that. And when I really started making my own decisions of things to read, like after I got through school, I pretty much loved every single book they chose for me to read in school.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved the Heart of Darkness so much in high school that my
Oh,
teacher
interesting.
she just gave me the book. She was like, "Here, you can keep it." I don't think she ever
Huh.
had a student that, and I'm not saying I enjoyed it in like, it's upsetting, but I was just, seeing what you can do with writing like that. I just, it all just becomes part of you. And I think as I got older, and even now, I'm really drawn to books that have a mix of reality and something off. Like
Yeah.
if I'm reading the back of a book and it's sort of like set in an alternate reality, or
Well,
not full sci-fi, not full fantasy, but just like a step back, like there's something that's like tweaking reality as we know it in some way. There's one small change, or maybe it's slightly in the future. I love that stuff. And I think I write sort of in that world as well sometimes too. So
yeah. Yeah.
I love like George Saunders. I love Margaret Atwood. I'm trying to think who pops into my head with that. I didn't make a list before.
No, no worries.
Oh, you know who I love is Marlon James. So great. And,
Hmm.
and if you haven't read him, he's a pretty like heavy sort of literary writer. He won the Booker Prize for a book about Bob Marley, essentially, called Brief History of Seven Killings. But he's two books into a trilogy of a fantasy book, of a fantasy series, and you should check it out. It's called I forget what he calls this series. The first one's called like Black. They have weird names like Black Wolf, Red Spider, or something like that. Anyway, check it out because
Yeah.
they're pretty awesome and they're pretty dense. And I mean, the world he created is pretty intense.
Yeah. Yeah. That is something I actually wanted to bring up with you. So it's funny that the conversation has headed that way. It seems like I don't know if I want to call it the barrier, but the separation between quote unquote literary fiction and I guess speculative fiction has started to break down to some degree.
Yeah.
I think you have a kind of an interesting perspective compared to most of our guests on here because you're coming a little more from the literary side. Most of our guests come more from the speculative fiction side. Are you seeing that, and how do you feel about that?
I absolutely know what you're talking about. And I think that literary, calling a book literary is such an odd description, because I feel like on some level every book is literary,
Mhm.
right? I mean, you're putting words on the page, you're pouring your thoughts and feelings, and if you're creating a world, a sci-fi world, a fantasy world, or a world that feels like our exact world, you're still creating literature. And so I feel like it's such an interesting way to describe stuff that
Mhm.
doesn't always work. And I think the reason that barrier is breaking down is because it's almost like, if you imagine, I'm trying to think of an analogy here, but the idea was that, I think, and you could correct me if I'm wrong,
Mhm.
but that if you were writing sci-fi, or that you were writing fantasy, say, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, you were writing like lesser literary stuff. You were
Mhm.
not considered the like highbrow
Mhm.
world. Actually, I can think of an analogy. It would be the same as like the comic book world. I can remember when I was younger, the people who were into comic books were considered like a step down from like reading novels or reading whatever
Yep.
else. And suddenly that same barrier broke down. It became like, you know what? Reading comics and reading graphic novels and being interested in superheroes and things is not some lesser thing. It's like top tier entertainment. It's the best writers are working on this stuff. And suddenly you saw
Yeah.
Comic-Con become this massive thing. You got the Marvel universe and movies and everything. And so I think that what you're seeing is that this sort of like, it's almost like stereotyping. You're basically saying, oh, if I heard this book was a fantasy book, that means it's not written as well as a literary book. And I
Mhm.
strongly push back on that. And I think that what people are seeing now is that it's not true, and that you can have a full,
Yeah.
whatever your brain considers a literary book can be any genre, any genre. And I think that that's what we're seeing now.
Yeah, definitely agree with you on that. Definitely agree with you. I really like your example with comic books. It's funny. I used to be one of the people who is snooty towards comic books, but recently, like a very recently, in the last 6 months, even my kids have started getting me into comic books, and now I'm like, I'm reading comic books like crazy. You know?
Yeah. It's great what kids can do, right?
Yeah.
You know, part of what's amazing about the world is there's so much art and there's so much stuff out there. And if you have a prejudice, sometimes the greatest thing that can happen in the world is to have somebody come along, whether it's your kid or a friend, that can open your eyes on this thing, that can show you that this
Uh-huh.
thing that you maybe for some reason didn't like or weren't open to is actually is a whole other world of things for you to explore. And I think that what makes human beings so amazing, if they'll allow themselves, is to make those mistakes, to say, you know what, cut that out, I shut that off, and I'm willing to say now I was wrong about that, and show me what I was missing. Let me see. And I think you're seeing a push
Yeah.
of that kind of thing as well with fiction from people that aren't normally the narrators that you would have seen in maybe 20 years ago. You know, you're seeing people
Yeah.
writing from other countries and from underrepresented voices. And I love to see something and be like, man, I've got to read this because this is like a view of the world that I know nothing about. And and
Yeah.
and, and I've got to see that. I've got to see, you know, what this person who has we have no direct correlation between our lives. I got to see what their take on everything is, you know. And I think that's the same with comic books. I mean, it's a different way to tell stories. And I had a similar experience with my kids. Not so much that I was ever against comic books, but there was definitely part of me that was like, when my kids were starting to read a lot, that they wanted to read the graphic novels. And there's so many for young readers. There's some amazing
Oh yeah.
there. And there was always this part of me that was like, no, but you've got to read novels too, you know? But in reality,
Mhm.
reading is reading. And if I can get my
Yeah.
children, and I have been very successful, to get them all to be enjoying reading, then it doesn't really matter if they're reading the same things I read or the things that I would want them to read or not, because they'll
Right.
find the things that are important to them. And I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that. I love that. That's been very much my experience too. One more question, and then I want to get back to your book. But you mentioned superheroes and just how popular they've become. You know, what's your thoughts on that? Like, why have superheroes taken over our culture in the last 15 years? Has it been 15 years? 10 years? Something like that.
I don't know. It's probably around that, maybe even more. You know, I think that I don't know for sure, but I can say that I don't even have a vast knowledge of superhero stuff, but I love superheroes. And my novel, the one that I was working on for all those years that I mentioned earlier, this one called Supernormal, the novel is about three people who they live in our exact world, right? The world is exactly how it is now,
Mhm.
but each of them have a superpower. One of them can fly, one of them can turn invisible, and one of them can heal people by touching them. And what I wanted to explore with it, which I thought was a little bit different than what was going on in the popular world, was that what would happen if someone really in our world knew that they could do something like that? And I thought they might not tell anybody, or they might sort of hide it, or it might be something that they don't feel comfortable with. And I sort of went that route with it and had a lot of fun with the book,
Mhm.
trying to imagine what it would be like to just discover that you have a superpower. And a lot of my stories did that. You know, they have this like small tweak where, I had a story in my first collection where a guy could teleport, things like that. And, but in my story, I wanted him to teleport because he was trying to ruin this relationship between his mom and her new boyfriend, and so he was like, whatever. So I try to take those ideas and, the big superhero ideas and make them smaller. And again, the question wasn't about me, but the reason I start there is because I think that people are fascinated with those kinds of things that don't exist now in our world, and trying to find a place for it. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, that like dreamy place, that place that people think about the world in a different way. And I think that
Hmm.
superheroes and comic books and to some extent to video games, they can really change your view of the way the world is. And I think people don't want to necessarily live in the world always that we live in right now. And writers are really, really
Yeah.
lucky to be able to create worlds, or musicians can create, music, and, filmmakers are making movies, but not everybody is doing that. And some people are looking for other ways to escape. And sometimes it's just reading or just knowing about or playing a game or whatever. And it takes you out of the world that we all have to live in, and kind of just like tweaks your view and starts to make, you feel like, what if that happened? Or,
Yeah.
it's nice. I think it's a really, really nice thing. And I think that superheroes kind of can carry us from tough moments in the world to the next moment.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, I think that's definitely a good way to think about it for sure. I want to go back to talking about your book a little bit. Like you've already mentioned, a lot of it is takes place like with very normal people, right? And in a very normal time. A lot of them or I think all of them actually deal with relationships, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
And then you insert like a monster, and then there's something weird happening with this monster, right? Or it well, obviously it's a monster. But it like a lot of the change surrounds the monster or whatever's happening. It's kind of like when I say like sticks to the monster. First of all, how did you choose the monsters for each one of your stories? Because it seems like yeah, no, I was thinking about how thematic the book is, and I'm like, did he start with the monster or did he start with the relationship, or how did that work exactly?
Yeah, it's really interesting how it's shifted over time, and I think that it took me a while to get to the final iteration, which was more based on when we see the relationship. So where in the relationship are they? And in the end up, I divided the book into sections so that the
Mhm,
first section was all like relationships that were sort of stored, toward the beginning. You know, what's that like first love, or people meet or they've only
mhm,
been together for a little while. Then you have the middle, kind of people are getting used to each other and all that stuff. And then the darker stories start to come toward the end where, they've had years, some of them in the stories, to
yeah.
to hold on to problems or small things that need to be addressed and that haven't. But when I was actually writing the stories, it's interesting because I was Googling monsters. So I just thought, if I had a sort of an idea that I wanted to do a Magic Can't Save a story, I would start Googling like popular monsters or whatever and see if anything just jumped out at me, right? If sometimes I would just have an idea, like, the unicorn story in there. I had this
Mhm,
idea that the woman would bring home the unicorn meat, and she would be trying to talk the narrator into eating this unicorn meat, which
yeah.
was supposedly save their relationship. And ideas like that are kind of more organic, and there's a few in there like that. The one with the leprechaun as well kind of just organically came about. But some of them were definitely more, I have this idea for a story. What monster could possibly show up here?
Yeah.
And I would have some in my mind. And a lot of times I would just wait and see. I would just see how it fit into the story. I don't plan a lot when I write. And so any monster could have showed up really sometimes. It was
Huh,
sometimes a surprise to me as well.
that's funny, that's funny. Which one of the monsters did you enjoy writing the most? Or, did any of them surprise you?
Yeah, I think that and some, I mean, it's funny that we're calling them monsters, but a couple of them, it shifts a little bit. Not all of them are monsters in the classic sense. And I
True.
think one of the ones that was the most fun to write was the one where the man is listening in on his wife's Zoom meetings, and
Oh yeah.
he's convinced that the guy that she's talking to is a centaur, and it becomes obsessed with this guy and is trying to go out and find him out in the world. And I that one was really a lot of fun to write. And in reality, the centaur, you don't ever really know for sure, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of the stuff was in his head. So sometimes the stories were very concrete. There's definitely a minotaur in this story. Or sometimes they're a little more, like this, where is this guy going crazy, or is this other guy really a centaur? And I think that it was fun to play with that. It was fun to play with the world a little, because from story to story, even though they're thematically linked, their belief in the monsters varies. Sometimes it's just facts, there's a Loch Ness monster that exists. Nobody's questioning it. Whereas like in the Tooth Fairy one, it's kind of like a little bit up in the air, what's going on as far as the belief in the
Yeah.
monster. And I think it's kind of it keeps it flowing. It keeps the collection going, because the world shifts a little bit each time as you go from relationship to relationship.
I gotta say the one with Bigfoot really cracked me up. Slash made me feel like Bigfoot is such a loser.
Oh
I,
yeah.
so like just to give the quick summary version for the audience, basically this guy finds Bigfoot digging through the trash, and Bigfoot's, I don't really think this is much of a spoiler because it's more about the
Right.
journey, I think, especially for these stories. But he's it turns out he's like obsessed with the guy's wife, and I, the guy at the
Yeah.
end is just like, okay, whatever, Bigfoot, here you like take our garbage.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty fun to do them, because I keep saying the stories were fun to write. But I think what ended up happening too is a lot of humor came through as well. So,
Yeah.
and it was really fun to see that, because I think if you sit down and you plan to say, I'm going to write a funny story, it's nearly impossible, or at least for me.
Hmm.
Like, I can't just sit down and say, all right, these are all the jokes I'm going to put in this book. It has to really happen organically with the characters and with the situation. And it really, with these stories, I was always able to find some places where the humor could come through, and it was always a real joy.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about that actually. You do have a lot of humorous stories. And I did notice the move from more humor at the beginning to more of like a sad tone at the end. But even in the middle, and even in some of the sadder ones, you had a lot of humor in there. I think humor is probably one of the toughest things to write. How do you know something is funny when you write it? How do you decide, yeah, okay, this joke works?
Yeah, it's hard. And like I said, like I was just saying, if I try to write something funny, it's not gonna happen. So I have to let it happen organically.
Hey everybody, forgive this slight interruption to your listening. Halfway through this call, I lost power and was unable to reconnect. So we scheduled to complete the interview at a later date. Everything after this point was in the second interview. I started recording before we had officially started thinking we'd immediately get back on board where we left off. However, we ended up getting a little political. So, with Josh's permission, I've included that part of the call here, and then we do eventually get back to where we left off. Actually, this is one of the least political interviews I've done in quite some time, to be honest with you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know I was listening to some stuff, and I think even in your byline it says something about like science fiction and politics.
Yeah.
And yeah. It's funny too, because like I was saying, I'm not like super, like my writing and everything is not super political. It's definitely more of like human, like on the human level.
Yeah.
But I do have a novel, an unpublished novel, that's very political. that I've had trouble getting anyone to accept
Huh.
at the moment. But it's funny, I don't go around and talking about politics, and usually even I'm not very active on social media, and I don't talk a lot about it. I'm very political, like in my day to day life. I'm very
Yeah.
outspoken, and
Yeah.
but it's funny going around this time and talking to people about the book and everything. It's gotten more political, and I think it has to do with the fact that I'm in Barcelona.
Yeah.
I think it sometimes leads to a lot of conversations that I normally wouldn't have about my own life outside of the books and outside of the music and the art is because of that. Tell me about why you're in Barcelona, or why, you decided to leave and everything. And it's interesting because it's impossible to talk about without talking about politics.
Yeah. Well, I have been wondering why you left, and I'm a little jealous. Like, I've always wanted to live outside the country, and I never did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I've always wanted to be outside of my own. You have wherever you're born and wherever you grow up. That's sort of the your like sphere of the world, right? It's like your tiny
Yeah.
little part of the world. And your job, I think, as a human being is to continue exploring. So as you get older, you meet new people, you go to different places, you find out, oh, this is there's a complete different view in the next country over, or the next even the next state over, or whatever, about certain topics and things. And I feel like it's up to you as a human being to explore the world and find those things and talk about those things. And so
Yeah.
I've always been interested about getting out of the country more. I feel like there's a very limited United States view, and you can really see it too when you do leave and you look back on it. It's like everything is United States focused. I feel
Yeah.
very under-equipped sometimes because of the education that I received to talk about sometimes what's happened in other parts of the world, in different wars and different countries, or even sometimes I'd be hard pressed to like show you exactly where a certain country is or something, because,
Yeah.
and again, I say that not out of ignorance and not out of not trying to catch up and to read and everything, but sometimes, that wasn't part of the education. I don't know if it was different for you, but for me, I don't feel like I got a lot of world history.
No.
And I feel that the focus of United States is always on United States. And so it's
Yeah.
okay. You can go into adulthood and not know anything that's going on anywhere. And all you know is that I live in the best country. We're the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think that attitude is helpful for anybody.
No.
And you can see it now too with this idea. It's like, if you think you live in the best country, you should always want to be bettering it.
Yes.
And I don't understand this idea that if you have a complaint about the United States, or you're like, healthcare could be better, or the education system could be better, or this could be better, it's somehow un-American to say.
Yeah.
Which I find really interesting, because I think the most American people are the ones that are saying, how can we make this place even
Yeah.
better? How are we constantly bettering? The same way I feel like I want to better myself, I would like to better the people around me and the country I live in. And it's an interesting time right now, to say the least.
Right. No, I love that. That is completely my philosophy on things. I have just never managed to make it to live outside the country. I've been outside the country many times, and I was fortunate to have a father who was all about traveling and had the money to allow us to travel to some degree. His philosophy, because he fought in Vietnam, his philosophy was like, you should get outside the country and see what the rest of the world is like so that you can appreciate what you've got.
Sure.
It really limits people's perspective on reality and what's happening and what could happen and all that sort of thing, right? So that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think that part of the thing about, like knowing the world, or being, or having empathy, really, is that you do. I mean, it's not only just to appreciate what you have, but which I think is important. I do think people should get out there so they appreciate their own lives
Hmm.
too, But I think it's also the idea that then you can understand the way other people live that's different than you, or that they have a different view than you, and it's not bad or scary, um or something to be ridiculed even, or whatever.
Hmm.
It's like, the more you learn about the rest of the world, the more you can feel like connected to other people. You know, it's like I always think about, I say to, we always try to tell the children, it's really hard. It's hard to tell children, hey, you should really appreciate
Yeah.
this, or you should, because they don't, they only know what they know. But I always feel that like people misunderstand how much in common people have.
Yeah.
That they only look at these small differences, right? I mean, skin color is like nothing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because deep down inside, I really feel like most people have the same goals, are exactly what you were just saying a moment ago with how you spend your time, which is that they want to care for their family, they want to have enough food for their family, they want to have
Yep.
they want to have experiences, they want to make sure everybody's cared for. They're going to work, they come home. What are they doing in their free time? They're probably watching movies, same as you. They're probably have their favorite music and all that stuff. I mean, it's people are so similar in so many ways too, that it really, to me, outweighs the differences. And when you start saying like this entire group of people is bad or terrible, I mean, again, I'm not saying anything revolutionary here.
Right.
You're missing the fact that the people who make up the majority of the world are literally just trying to do the same thing you're doing.
Yeah.
And they might have different tools or different ways of going about it, but essentially they just want what's best for their families.
Yeah.
And
100% agree.
yeah, and it's crazy how much people focus on small differences between people.
Yeah.
And use that as a way to demonize. And I mean, you see it in the US right now. It's just awful. It's just awful.
Yeah.
How much demonization is going on, and how horrible the like immigration stuff is right now. And again, we don't have to go on and on about it, but it just it really makes me sad. And when you watch it from over here, there's something even sadder about it, because you almost feel like you're watching the downfall of something. You're watching the beginning of the end of something, and it's kind of sad.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, though. I will say, and then we'll go back to talking about your book, but I will say one of the biggest and most influential things that ever happened to me to change my perspective on things was I ended up having a black roommate in college, and we ended up becoming like best friends for a long time, and fast forward a few years, and it turned, I was at a point where almost all of my friends were black, and that really, as you can imagine, completely changed my perspective on things, and completely radicalized me, to be honest. You know what I mean? Because I could just go to somebody's house or their family's house and just hang out and just see and experience the things that are happening, you know what I mean? And just be like, wow, this is completely different than what my family ever had to deal with, you know what I mean? And like, these aren't things that we ever were scared about or we ever worried about much. Like getting pulled over by the cops was like, oh, I'm going to get a ticket. For them, even back then, and this is like in the 90s, it was like, oh man, this might be life or death. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and it's and absolutely, and I would say that in that scenario that you're talking about, it's exactly it. It's like you have to go out into the world and you have to meet people.
Yeah.
It's like if you don't have those experiences, then you don't get to grow as a person. I have no control over where I was born or what my family situation was like. I mean, we didn't have the money to travel. We weren't traveling at all. And so I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, and that's pretty much my whole life. That was everything I knew. And so when I went to college, I went to downtown Chicago, and there's a huge difference between downtown Chicago and the suburbs. And it was amazing. It was totally amazing. And you completely get why there's people out there that think cities are so scary. They're like the worst place you can go. And it's not because of anything violence or anything like that. It's because some people are just terrified of that mixing of cultures and that mixing of people, and the idea that everyone could actually live in harmony like that and could actually have all these different religions and viewpoints and everything, but still function in a wonderful way. And some people don't want to see that, and that's ultimately what they're scared of. I mean, I could go even deeper and start talking about how there's actually people, including my own father, that I don't speak to anymore because of politics and because of their views.
Wow.
And I remember, some of the things I think about my dad before, like right going into the first time that Trump was elected, there were certain things there that later I saw on a grander scale, like things that I thought were really strange about my dad. Like, why does he feel that way? Or why is he saying this thing?
Yeah.
And come to find out that it wasn't just some anomaly. He wasn't just some weird guy. That stuff was being disseminated, and his like fear of coming to visit Chicago and his fear of, the world basically,
Huh.
it wasn't just something that he was formulating on his own. It was happening,
Right.
but I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't know it was so widespread because I think all of us felt like we were in some kind of a bubble. Obama was president, and the world seemed like it was moving in the direction we wanted it to. And, it was easy to get complacent. And I think we're all regretting that now.
Yeah. Yeah. I would definitely agree with you on that. I mean, okay. You said so much good stuff in there. I totally agree with you. I am lucky that I was born into a family of people who think critically and have encouraged their children to think critically. And I'm talking going back generations even, like I mentioned, my grandfather on the one side was a union organizer, and that doesn't
Right.
necessarily automatically make you not racist, you know what I mean? But my
Sure.
grandfather, he died during the Obama administration, and he literally died with a picture of Obama beside his bed because he was just so amazed and happy that we had a black president. He just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I do feel very lucky to be able to come from a family like that.
Yeah. It sounds awesome.
Yeah. I wish more people had that experience, and I haven't. I've been fortunate that the whole Trump thing hasn't made me break from a lot of people in my family. Now it's made me break from some of my in-laws,
Sure.
but I've been fortunate in that it has not affected the immediate core of my family.
Yeah, it's nice. I'm glad for you, for sure.
Thank you. Yeah. I like I said, I just feel very fortunate through all of this. But let's get back to your book a little bit. We left off. I was asking you about humor and writing. Humor is one of the toughest things to write. So, and I saw that throughout your writing in your collection. But how do you know when something is funny?
Yeah, which I think is a really good question because I do get asked sometimes like how I write humor, like how I go about it. But I don't think anyone's ever asked me how I know if it's funny or not, which I think is a really interesting tweak on that. I can say to answer the question that I've answered in the past, which is that do I set out to be funny? The answer is usually no, because I think that if you are in trying really hard to be funny, it sort of comes across. I think it takes it feel like, I think humor has to feel, it's sort of like humor in life, right? Like if you're having a conversation with someone, it's not like I have a bunch of prepared jokes I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
Whatever humor comes out of our conversation is going to be from us riffing off each other, um, and diving into different topics and being quick about it, and finding some humor in there. And I tend to do the same kind of thing with my writing. So I know, again, I don't want to sound completely like I'm full of myself, but I know that I can get there. I know I can make something funny. And so what I have to do is almost like tell myself, but don't try. Don't try to be funny.
Yeah.
And then let the characters talk, let the situation happen, and see, like, I almost treat writing in the same way that I would a conversation. Like I said, I don't come in prepared with jokes to tell you. And I wouldn't even say I've been 100% all that funny in this conversation anyway. But the idea is that you don't know where it's going to go. And so some stories are funnier than other ones. And you have to sort of like go with the tone of it. And I will say that, to answer your actual question, I think that I know that it's funny if it makes me laugh.
Yeah.
And I think that I kind of laugh at my own jokes. And I think part of it is um, the reason that it happens is because there is this part of it that feels like it's outside of me. If I'm really going and the characters are good, right? Like they're happening and the situation is happening, the humor sometimes comes out very quickly, just like it would in a conversation. And
Uh-huh.
and I don't always see it coming. I don't always have that, like, it's almost like I'm hearing it for the first time too from the characters. And so if in the moment it kind of makes me laugh or chuckle, then I know I got it. And yeah, it's kind of fun when I think of it that way, that I almost like let the characters be funny
Yeah.
instead of me trying to be funny. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah, absolutely it does, because I think one of the elements of your style that stuck out to me was the dialogue between your characters. And then researching your career and stuff for this interview, I then found out that you had done you've done schooling in film, which we mentioned earlier in the interview. And I was like, oh, okay. That kind of makes sense. So I can see that, the the interactions that the characters have really are a lot of what makes it funny. You know what I mean?
No, I was just going to say that I think that it's something we had talked about before, which is that your life experience is like everything that you're doing is feeding your writing. And there's just no way that I can divorce what I did in film from my continued writing, even though I'm not writing that much film stuff anymore. And what's really interesting about film, and I think that it's a really good experiment. I think that people like writers, if they've never, like a fiction writer, if they've never written a script before, they should give it a go, because it's really, really interesting when you stop to think that when you're writing a film or when you're watching a film, everything that's being given to you that you need to follow the story and to like know how a person is feeling or whatever. Of course, there's some visual things, right? So you've got your blocking and the action and all that kind of stuff, but almost all of it's in dialogue. And if you can find that sweet spot where your dialogue is working for you, where the characters are saying something but they maybe mean something else, or the humor is coming out within between the two of them, or three, or whatever, however many characters, but there's a conversation going on and the humor is coming out naturally as if two people or three people were talking or whatever, then it feels kind of magical. It feels sort of like you're writing real life, and I don't always see that in novels, right?
Hmm.
I think a lot of times you get summations of what was discussed,
Hmm.
and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, or everyone has their own style, but sometimes I'm always like, man, I would have loved to hear them get to that
Yeah.
to that moment, or I would have loved to hear. And again, everyone's got a different style. I mean, I remember when actually was sending this collection around to agents, and I had an agent write me back and say, I think the book is really good, but it's got too much dialogue.
Ah,
And so everyone has their styles of writing, but they also have the style of what they gravitate toward in their reading as well. And so you're never going to please everybody. You're never going to write a book that someone's like, everyone who reads it is like, you nailed
yeah.
it. And so I think if you're true to yourself and how you want to do it, then you'll find the right people that want to read it.
Yeah. Yeah. I always think when the author summarizes something, it's an interesting choice. And there are times where I agree with you, like, oh, I wish like I could have seen that play out, where I'm like, oh, thank goodness they summarized that, because that would have been extremely dull, then
Right.
more interestingly, you get these times when, like they don't summarize something that you think they should have, but it's still good and interesting, and kind of, I don't know, you learn something about the characters or whatever. So it can be interesting to kind of sit there and see what different authors do at different times.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's such a decision by the writer and their style. I will say that I know a lot of writers who consider themselves more. I think more often than not, I hear writers say, "My weak spot is dialogue,"
Uh-huh.
and people don't feel confident in the dialogue that they write. Even just, I won't name any names, but I know a bunch of writers that feel that way,
Yeah.
whether it's true or not. But thinking that can hinder you a little bit. Like if
Hmm.
you feel like you have a weakness It's kind of like, hey, I sprained my ankle. Now I'm walking this way,
Yeah.
because I'm trying to save my ankle. If you feel like you have some sort of an injury, or you feel like you have a weakness of dialogue, then you might shy away from it. And suddenly you instead of diving into it, you're maybe summarizing or whatever. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I used to say that my weak spot was describing people.
Huh.
And I still think maybe it's a weak spot. Like, I don't think that anyone's reading my book and saying, I can picture perfectly every single character in here. I definitely leave it open to you can bring your own thoughts as to what they look like. So no one's stopping to look at a mirror
Yeah.
or anything.
Yeah. That's interesting. There are definitely authors who just don't describe the people in the book. And it's funny, sometimes I read the description of somebody in the book and I'm like, I don't like that description. I'm just gonna make up my own
Yeah,
description.
exactly. Yeah,
I don't
no.
know if you do that.
No, no, totally. I mean, I get to the point too when I'm reading and where I don't remember how the writer described the
Mm.
person anyway.
Hmm.
It might have described them early on, and by the time I'm thinking about, I wonder what they might look like, I'm so far past the description that doesn't really matter. And so
Yeah.
that's for me, at least as a reader, I don't retain all that information. And so I think as a writer, I put it back out the same way, where I think like if I just load up a bunch of information at the beginning, you're going to forget anyway.
Yeah.
So we may as well just get right into it. Let's just get going.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally. All right. Well, I've had you on here for quite some time at this point. Let's wrap this up. I've got one more question for you, and then I want to get to our final questions that we ask all of the folks who come on here. We did talk a little bit about your music, but I want to ask you, how has being a musician influenced your writing work?
I think for me, the most influential part of music is sort of like a rhythm. I always joke about how I don't think I could talk about writing, right? Like, I'm not going to
Hmm.
write a craft book. I
Hmm.
don't when I sit down and I talk to people about books and stuff, I think I probably, I'm not like talking about it in a way that sounds like I'm aware of like every single bit of how the construction of all that stuff works, or that I'm over
Hmm.
analyzing anything. And I'm not saying there's a bad way to talk about writing or not, but I'm not the guy. Like, if you want to do a deep dive,
Right.
I'm not the guy. And I know, and so whenever I think about writing, I think about it as like a flow or a rhythm, right? So if I'm writing a new project and I'm getting started, sometimes I have a tough time. The first page or the first couple pages might be the hardest part to write, because sometimes I just read it back and I think, it's not really, this isn't the what I was going for. I can't put my finger on it. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's not there yet. And so once I get it, when that rhythm happens, when it's going, then I can write the rest of the story really quickly, even if I don't know what was going to happen. So, like I said, I'm pretty loose. I don't have it all worked out from the start. So those first couple pages might be the most important thing that happens. And you know, I think that I play the drums, and I don't know, again, like we said, I went to film school, I wrote some scripts for a while, and all that stuff feeds in. I definitely think the idea of like keeping the rhythm of something, being the guy in the band that's like keeping the pace and keeping everything going, it definitely affects it.
Uh-huh.
And I think also too, I very much consider myself a listener of music. So I listen to so much music. I have such a hard time talking about just what's your favorite band. I don't have like,
Yeah.
one thing I've been listening to for 20 years. I'm all over the place, and I'm constant every week. On Friday, I'm like, what came out? What's the new stuff? I have a bunch of friends. We're sharing stuff. Hey, did you hear this yet? Did you hear this? Sometimes I'll listen to something multiple times in a week, and then I might not listen to it again ever. I don't know,
Yeah.
because I've moved on to so many other things. And I think that is part of it too. I think that like exploration and that finding new music and being and always looking for stuff is also feeds into this idea of like rhythm. Like, what's the thing I want to hear right now? I'm about to sit down and write, or I'm about to work. What's the type of music I need to hear right now? Is also, I think, an analogy for how I feel about individual projects, or
Hmm.
an individual story or whatever. Is what's the overall vibe of this, and how can I sort of sustain that?
Cool. Cool. I am the same way with music too, by the way. someone will ask me, "What's your favorite band?" I'm like, "Okay, well, what genre?
Yeah,
Okay, what subgenre of that genre? Okay."
exactly. I'm the same. Well, the funny part about it is too is when people ask about music or even books or whatever, if you draw a blank or you're so overwhelmed with, you're so involved in music or you're so involved in that you can't just pick a favorite one. Sometimes I think the other person is like, oh, this person actually doesn't really listen to that much music, or
Yeah,
maybe they don't read as or but because you have a different, you're like so immersed in it that I don't really think of it as like what's my favorite. It's like what are the things that are doing it for me right now, you know?
yeah,
And to totally, I'm all over with genres, and
yes,
and sometimes I'll say I can't listen to lyrics today. It's gotta be instrumental. I can't, it's too distracting to hear somebody singing, or I need something like really heavy. Give me the heaviest possible thing I could listen to right now, or I just want something quiet and on in the background or whatever. There's so many modes of what you might want out of music and what you're going for that. And I have a lot of friends, and you probably do too, that they just listen to the same few things over and over again. And I think that that's great too.
yeah,
I mean, not everyone has to have the same experience with music, but I think that the norm may be that you have a couple of favorite bands and those are your go-to. You get in the car, you turn that on, when you're, and maybe you're not listening to thousands of hours of music every month. And I think that's great, but it does make the conversation difficult when you start, because I think people want to hear what's that one band what's your go-to band? And I have some favorites, but it's not the same. It's
yeah.
different.
100%, 100% agree with you on that. So, we have a few questions that we ask everybody. The main one being, what is bringing you hope right now?
My children, for sure. I mean, like anything that you can find in life that has so much possibility ahead of it,
Right.
anything that you can find like that. So it doesn't have to be children. But I just think that the possibilities, like future possibilities, I think as soon as you get to a point where you're not looking at the future and thinking that things could change or that you could better, or something could happen for you. I think we kind of touched on it earlier with this idea of like, even with the arts, if you can't picture yourself in the arts anymore, then you might not do it anymore. And so I think that everyone should have something that they could see changing or moving in the future, that they can be a part of that growth. And for me, it's definitely my children.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I feel very much the same way with mine. Okay, we talked about some of your projects that are happening. Do you have anything else that you want people to know about that's coming out soon?
I don't have anything slated. What I have now are a handful of unpublished projects. So I sort of mentioned it earlier, but I have I have a novel. It would be my second novel,
Hmm.
and it's this massive beast of a thing. It takes place over like 30 years. It's like full alternate history. It's definitely influenced by the what was going on, especially in the first term of Trump. It was definitely influenced by those years.
Hmm.
It's full of like just nutty magical stuff. It's also 540 pages, and so I think that that's what's holding it back right now.
Yeah.
But I feel really strongly about it. I always joke that, they always tell you write the book that you want to see, like write the book that only you can write or whatever. And with that project, I feel like I did it. I wrote this thing that only I could do, that I would pick up in a second if I saw it at the store. And I haven't been able to get anyone to feel as excited as I am about it. But I think one day, I think someone's going to be like, that 540-page length is not scary, and that's when it's gonna start to happen. So yeah, that's the life of writers. You just go project to project, and you hope that it catches the right people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, what's the name of your novel and your other collection again?
My first collection was called Not Everyone is Special. It was all like stories I wrote in over like a 10-year period from when I was like switching out of screenwriting stuff and into fiction writing. And I think it came together really well. I went through all the stories I'd published and some I hadn't over that time. And I had that title, Not Everyone is Special. And I thought, if the story could theoretically have that title, then it could fit in the collection. So they're all kind of linked. They weren't written as like linked stories as much as Magic Can't Save Us, my current collection. But I did try to link them by using that title as sort of a barometer. If it could, every story there could almost have that title. And so it was a pretty fun collection to put together. And then my novel is called Supernormal, and it came out a couple of years after that.
Awesome. I love it. So everyone out there, go and check out those 2 other books from Josh Denslow, and make sure, you keep your eyes peeled for this door stopper that he's got sitting out there. Does that have a title yet, by the way?
Years. Right now it's called The Wishlings.
The Wishlings. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. So where can people find you online? You mentioned that you're not online a lot, but do you have anything out there that people could connect with you?
My main place I'm on right now is Instagram.
Okay.
And you can find me by searching my name there. And then I'm also on Blue Sky, but I'm not really active on there, but I'm there. Like if people came to find me there, they would at least get updates on things that are going on. And it would be one place I would definitely put things that were upcoming, or, links to stuff.
Awesome. Well, that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been quite a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, man. Well, cool. Thanks a lot for having me, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thanks so much. If This Goes On, Don't Panic is edited and produced by Alan Bailey. Our theme music is by Father Flamethrower, additional music is by Christopher Snydrowski, and outro music by Sable Aradia. Intro by Dave Robison. Special thanks to our guest, Josh Denslow. Thanks for supporting us, and we'll see you again soon.